When Lars Porsena, an Etruscan king, besieged the young city of Rome, a young Roman named Gaius Mucius infiltrated the Etruscan camp with the purpose of assassinating Porsena, but he killed the wrong man. After he was captured, Mucius showed no fear. To prove that Romans valued honor above pain or death, he thrust his right hand into a fire altar, holding it there without flinching. "Watch," he said, "and see how cheap the body is to those who care only for glory and honor." Impressed by his courage and unnerved when Mucius revealed there were 300 more young Romans sworn to assassinate him, Porsena released him unharmed. Soon after, the king sought peace terms and withdrew his forces. This act of character intimidated an enemy more than any army could. Rome was then small and weak, yet because its people embodied such virtues like courage, duty, and contempt for personal comfort, it was destined to rise to greatness. Let's explore what truly made the Romans great. Everyone knows that Rome was a great civilization. Proof of it are the multitude of structures that still stand. The Colosseum, aqueducts, roads. Nobody built better than Romans. They also forged a huge empire, stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates and from Germany to the sands of Sahara. We tend to derive Roman greatness from the physical structures they built, or the technology they possessed at the time. But those represent the effect and not the cause of Roman greatness. These physical marvels and vast conquests didn't appear out of nowhere. They were the effects of the Roman character, rooted in a set of moral values that Romans called the mos maiorum, the customs of the ancestors. An unwritten guide to living passed down through generations, shaping every citizen from farmer to senator. At its core were a handful of virtues that made people capable of extraordinary things. Virtus, courage, and moral strength. It wasn't just battlefield bravery, it meant living with integrity, knowing right from wrong, and putting the greater good above personal gain. Pietas, respect and devotion to the gods, family, homeland, and ancestors. This was the glue of Roman society. Honoring obligations created unbreakable bonds. Fides, trustworthiness, reliability, and good faith. Romans prided themselves on keeping their word even when it hurt. Disciplina, self-control, order, and perseverance under pressure. It turned chaotic mobs into disciplined legions. Gravitas and constantia, serious dignity and unyielding perseverance. Romans didn't panic or despair, they endured, adapted, and pressured on. When Romans embodied these ideals, they built an empire. When they drifted away, as later generations did, the empire crumbled from within. The best proof of how these virtues created greatness is the Second Punic War, Rome's darkest hour against Hannibal Barca of Carthage. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants, won victories at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where in a single day Rome lost up to 70,000 men, one of the worst military disasters in history. Hannibal roamed Italy for over a decade, devastating farms and cities. Most empires would have collapsed. Not Rome. They raised new armies, from boys, slaves, and the elderly. They adopted a Fabian strategy, avoiding direct battles, wearing Hannibal down through delay and attrition. But most importantly, their allies in Italy, hundreds of cities and tribes, stayed loyal to Rome. Because Romans had earned their trust through consistent fairness, shared citizenship benefits, and honoring alliances. Even after Cannae, when Hannibal tried everything to make them change sides, promises of independence, threats, bribes, most refused to defect. Cities like Capua and a few southern ones did switch sides, but the core heartland, the central Italians held firm. They trusted Rome's word, that loyalty would be repaid, that Rome would protect them, and that breaking faith brought shame worse than defeat. As times passed, the tides turned. Hannibal, isolated without major reinforcements, was eventually forced out. Rome counterattacked, invaded Africa, and crushed Carthage. Rome did not win because of superior technology or numbers alone. It won because its people, from senators to allied farmers, lived by virtues that made surrender unthinkable. But the same virtues that built Rome could not last forever. One of my favorite stories from Roman history perfectly captures the peak of that character and shows what was lost later. In 458 BC, Rome faced a dire crisis. The Aequi tribe had trapped the Roman army in the mountains and defeat seemed certain. The Senate, desperate, turned to Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, a modest farmer living on a small plot outside the city. They found him plowing his fields. Without hesitation, he accepted the role of dictator, absolute power for the emergency, and raised an army, defeating the enemy in just 16 days. Then he immediately resigned his dictatorship and returned to his farm. He wanted no parades for himself, nor was he interested in obtaining wealth. King Cinnatus embodied everything great about early Rome: humility, duty, self-restraint, and putting the republic above personal ambition. He could have become king-like, but he chose the simple life of a citizen. This act of selfless service to the society was remembered by the Romans for centuries. Yet, as Rome's conquests multiplied, so did its riches. Conquests in Greece, Africa, and the East brought to the city gold, slaves, luxuries, and exotic goods. The success of Rome changed its people. Wealth replaced frugality, pleasure-seeking replaced discipline. The old mos maiorum, the customs of the ancestors, began to erode. New generations born into opulence grew soft. They chased hedonism, banquets that lasted for days, exotic foods, endless entertainments. Senators and elites indulged in corruption, bribery, and neglected their civic duties. Historians like Livy believed luxury corrupted virtue, turning brave farmers into decadent pleasure seekers. The discipline faded and ambition became selfish, not patriotic. Sons couldn't match their father's abilities. Armies relied more on mercenaries than citizen soldiers. Leaders prioritized personal power over the common good. Still, Rome was surprisingly long-lived. Even as cracks appeared in the Republic, the empire under Augustus and his successors endured for centuries. Pax Romana brought stability, roads, law, and prosperity. But everything has an end. When the foundational virtues finally gave way to widespread corruption, the empire could no longer regenerate. Barbarian invasions and internal rot finished what moral decay began. Rome didn't fall in a day, it faded as its people forgot what made them great. The story of Rome is more than just a history lesson. When we look at the trajectory of Roman society, we see a pattern that has repeated across many civilizations in human history. It is a cycle that governs not just nations, but families and individuals as well. There is truth in the observation that hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times. The founders of Rome were born into a world of hardship and constant threat. They had to be great to survive. But greatness creates its own future problems. The very success that the founding fathers of Rome achieved, the safety, the wealth, the infrastructure, removed the pressure that made them strong in the first place. The first generations built things through sacrifice and grit. The next generations inherited the system and maintained it out of respect for their fathers. But then, as newer generations were born into comfort, they began to view the fruits of that sacrifice as a birthright rather than a responsibility. As the struggle for survival disappears, the character required for that survival begins to atrophy. We see this today. The self-made individual who builds an empire only for their grandchildren to squander it in a search for novelty and comfort. The lesson is eternal. Character is the true foundation of greatness, not monuments, not wealth, not technology. I think we should study the story of Rome and the stories of other great civilizations that eventually crumbled for a very important reason. We are a civilization that appears to be slowly decaying in similar ways. The signs are there in the erosion of moral values, the rise of individualism, and the normalization of depravity among those at the top. Proof of this rot can be seen in the recent Epstein file releases. The massive January 2026 drop by the Department of Justice, over 3 million pages, thousands of videos and images, shows the network of powerful people getting away with exploitation, all shielded by money, connections, and influence. It's not just a few bad apples. It's a whole system where the elite play by different rules. Sounds a lot like the luxury and corruption the old Romans said wrecked their own society. But what is truly worrying is not necessarily that those things happened. Scandals among the elite are not something new. What should alarm us most is that our Western society seems largely numb to it all. There is no strong unified reaction from the people, no widespread outrage, no mass demands for accountability or reform. Instead, many seem to simply scroll past them in exhaustion. This apathy is the most dangerous symptom. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video.